The wrought iron gates of Ironwood Hall creaked open, but no one came to greet her. Not that she expected a welcome. Amara Sinclair stepped out of the car without hesitation, her heels pressing into the gravel with the precision of someone who had made up her mind a long time ago. In her hand was a simple tote bag, linen, black, unbranded. The kind of thing a woman like her carried when she wanted to go unnoticed. But there was nothing casual about this visit. The real weapon sat in the trunk, locked, waiting. Amara took in the mansion that loomed ahead, centuries-old bricks, ivy, curling up its spine like a memory that refused to die. This was not just a house. This was a bloodline, a fortress built on inherited power, old money, and quiet corruption. And today, it was about to face its reckoning. She adjusted her coat and moved forward. Not too fast, not too slow. Every step deliberate, as if she had rehearsed this moment. And perhaps she had in her mind for years. Inside, the house smelled like polished wood and withheld truths. No voices echoed from the drawing room. No laughter spilled from the conservatory. But Amara knew they were watching. Behind the velvet curtains, behind the oil portraits of dead men who had never imagined someone like her walking these halls, alone, unafraid, and in control. She passed the marble bust of Harold Vexley, the patriarch who had once told her over dinner that merit was a beautiful myth. He had meant it as a compliment, as if she were an exception to some unspeakable rule. Today, that rule would die. She entered the study, placed the tote bag on a chair, and sat, perfectly centered under the chandelier. She did not touch the bookshelves. She did not pour a drink. She simply waited, calm, composed. Not because she lacked emotion, but because she had already burned through the fury. Upstairs, she could hear the faint rustle of movement. The Vexleys were stalling. They knew something was coming. They just did not know what form it would take. Outside, in the trunk of her car, the briefcase rested. Inside it, signed affidavits, bank records, hard drives, and a single document that would detonate everything this family had built. She was not here for revenge. She was here for correction. And when the clock struck noon, Ironwood Hall would never be the same again. Amara's first office had no walls, just a folding desk wedged between two borrowed chairs in the back of a laundromat. No receptionist. No VC calls. No backup. Just one laptop, a phone that never stopped ringing, and the weight of knowing that failure was not an option. She had launched her tech company with a $1,000 grant and a quiet defiance she kept hidden beneath polite smiles. Code by day, contracts by night, and at dawn she mopped the very floor she worked from. Investors saw her as too intense, too direct, or worse, too much. Still, she kept building. Bit by bit, product by product, she scaled. Until there was a breakthrough. A software deal with a logistics firm changed everything. One viral Forbes article later, her inbox was flooded. Suddenly the same people who ignored her were quoting her in boardrooms. And then came Nathaniel Vexley. He had introduced himself at a tech panel. Clean-cut, camera-charming, and every bit the legacy boy. He spoke the language of capital with practiced ease. His family's name opened doors Amara had been knocking on for years. She did not see the warning signs. Not at first. Their courtship was a headline maker. The outsider entrepreneur and the heir to an old money empire. Interviews followed. So did speculation. But Amara did not care. She believed love, real love, could survive even this. The wedding was held on the south lawn of Ironwood Hall. Chandeliers swung from oak trees. Photographers whispered about the new American dynasty. Amara smiled through it all, unaware she was walking into a house that viewed her not as a partner, but as a disruption. The first red flag came 3 months later. At a board meeting for a Vexley-backed tech subsidiary, she pitched a strategy, Shift. It was efficient, scalable, and backed by data. But the room went quiet. One director cleared his throat and said, "Bold. But maybe we should run that through more." Seasoned eyes. She was the only black woman in the room. She had founded a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. Yet suddenly, she was being spoken to like a promising intern. Still she stayed, because that is what strong women are told to do: stay and prove them wrong. The sabotage was subtle at first. Calendar invites left out. Memos changed after approval. And always someone smiling as they looped her in late. Then came the betrayal she could not ignore. One night, while reviewing quarterly audits, she found a pattern. Funds marked for R&D had been siphoned off into shell accounts. The names were familiar: board members, cousins, even Nathaniel. Millions diverted into hush projects, lobbying, and God knew what else. She confronted him. He looked at her with that same expression he wore when a waiter brought the wrong wine: mild inconvenience, nothing more. "You do not understand how these things work," he had said. "These are legacy obligations." Legacy obligations. That was when she understood. She was never meant to be one of them. She had been allowed in the room because she was useful, polished, good press, a symbol of progress that cost them nothing, until she asked for truth. The fallout was swift. Rumors seeded in the press, anonymous sources claiming Amara struggled with internal dynamics. Her name was quietly removed from strategy decks. At family dinners, conversation stopped when she entered, and then the final blow: a late-night board vote. No warning. A motion passed to shift blame for financial irregularities onto a consultant, her. She was not even in the building when it happened. They used her presence as proof of involvement, then painted her as the outsider, who had pushed too far. Suddenly she was not the strategic partner. She was the liability. Amara did not cry that night. She sat alone in the Ironwood Hall library, surrounded by portraits of men who had never built a damn thing in their lives, and realized she had been asking the wrong question all along. It was never about being accepted. It was about who gets to write the legacy. They wanted her erased, quietly, professionally, with no mess. A footnote in their empire's timeline. So she made a choice, not to burn it all down in rage, but to dismantle it, piece by piece, with the very tools they underestimated. She began collecting emails, wire, transfers, meeting minutes, things that did not look dangerous until they were arranged with intent. She met with whistleblowers, secured affidavits, and traced every shell account back to the Vexley name. By the time she stepped foot in Ironwood Hall today, she had already won the war. Now, she just needed to deliver the blow that would make it public. Leander Quinn did not ask how she found him. The moment he stepped into Amara's private office, he shut the door behind him like a man preparing for war. No handshake, no small talk. Just a glance at the sealed folders on the desk, and a nod that meant, "I've seen worse." Let's begin. Leander was not a lawyer in the traditional sense. He had once dismantled a media conglomerate using only subpoena strategy and a spreadsheet. His specialty: impossible cases with powerful enemies and buried truths. Amara laid out the Vexley network: charitable fronts, ghost LLCs, off-books transfers, strategic gaslighting. Leander listened in silence, his pen barely moving. When she finished, he turned the folder around and wrote 3 letters across the first page. TRO, temporary restraining order, the first of 4 stages. He outlined them on the whiteboard with clean surgical strokes. TRO, stop the fund transfers, freeze motion, catch them mid-step. Civil suit, hit them in court with evidence the public will eventually see. PR storm, controlled leaks to shape the narrative. No more troubled consultant spin. Class action, invite every wrong stakeholder to the front line. Make it too big to bury. We do not accuse, Leander said. We reveal, quietly, logically, ruthlessly. Over the next 10 days, her office transformed into a war room, whiteboards filled with connections. Code names replaced actual initials. A team of forensic accountants flew in from Chicago, hired under an anonymous firm name. They found the missing millions and the paths they took through ironclad trusts, art donations, and phantom vendor payments. Private investigators mapped the Vexley orbit. A judge on retainer, a cousin running interference at the Chamber of Commerce, even a reporter receiving monthly consulting fees. Amara reviewed every document. Not with fury, but with surgical calm. This was not revenge. This was justice done precisely. Late one night, Ruth, the only one from her original company still by her side, brought her tea and whispered, "You are not alone in this." Amara looked up from the affidavit she was reviewing. Her eyes did not soften, but something behind them shifted. She nodded once. That was all Ruth needed. The final piece still lived behind enemy walls, Ironwood Hall, a flash drive, hidden in her old office, disguised as part of a broken desk lamp. It contained private voice memos and internal strategy documents accidentally synced to her personal cloud months ago. She had encrypted them, buried them, and left them untouched. Now, they were the key. At 3:42 a.m., she pulled into the driveway. Ironwood Hall slept under thick fog. Motion lights flickered as if unsure how to greet her. She walked silently across. The gravel, each step deliberate. No alarms tripped. She still knew the passcode. Inside, the halls echoed. The same oil painting stared down at her, unmoved by time or betrayal. She passed the drawing room, paused briefly by the grand piano, where Nathaniel once played her Bach in the early days, and continued on without flinching. Upstairs, the office remained untouched. Her lamp still sat on the corner table, a relic, unimportant. She unscrewed the base, pulled the drive, pocketed it. But something made her pause, a faint sound, floorboards behind her. She turned, expecting a staff member, maybe even Nathaniel. Nothing. Just the long hallway, empty. She left without looking back. As she stepped out into the night, the wind picked up. Trees rustled like whispers. The fog began to lift just enough to see the reflection of the moon in the windshield of her car. She opened the trunk, placed the flash drive inside the briefcase, and locked it shut. And then, for the first time in weeks, she exhaled. The plan was in motion now. Every thread tied, every truth backed by proof. There would be no desperate press conference, no screaming matches in front of cameras. Just a quiet, precise unraveling of power. When Ironwood Hall woke in the morning, it would be the beginning of their reckoning. Amara drove away slowly, headlights slicing through the mist. She did not look back, because she already knew. The house had no idea the storm it had sheltered. The courtroom buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Cameras were not allowed inside, but every journalist in the front row had their phones ready, thumbs hovering. No one expected this hearing to matter, just a procedural footnote in the quiet dissolution of another rich family's disagreement. Until Amara walked in. No entourage, no jewelry, no nervous glances, just her, in a dark charcoal suit, and Leander, 2 steps behind, carrying a slim case that held enough evidence to freeze a dynasty. At the opposite table, Soren Vexley leaned back in his chair like he was already bored. His attorneys, 3 of them, all polished and loud, cracked jokes under their breath. They had pre-written their victory tweets. One even wore cufflinks shaped like gavels. Judge Newbury entered 5 minutes late, carrying a heavy stack of files. Rumor had it she had no patience for theatrics, and even less for family feuds disguised as legal warfare. She adjusted her glasses, glanced at the plaintiff, then at the defense. "Let's keep this clean," she said, "and let's keep it moving." The defense opened first. Their lead attorney, Harold Drexler, spoke like he was rehearsing a TED Talk. "Your Honor, this request for a temporary restraining order is built entirely on conjecture, supposition, and what amounts to a personal vendetta by a recently estranged party. Ms. Sinclair was, until last quarter, a consultant. one who no longer has standing within the Vexley Trust. He smiled like the matter was settled. Leander did not even stand to counter. He simply slid a folder across the table. "Your Honor," he said, "contained in that folder is a preliminary forensic report compiled by a third-party accounting firm, names redacted for safety. It outlines over $11.2 million in undocumented transfers, some routed through shell corporations registered in Belize and Cyprus. The transfers began the month after Miss Sinclair's access to internal financials was revoked." He paused. "These are not accusations. These are signatures, dates, bank records." The courtroom went still. Judge Newberry opened the folder. Her lips pressed into a hard line as she read. Soren stopped smirking. The judge looked up. "Do you have documentation verifying the chain of custody on these files?" Leander nodded once. "Signed, notarized, and certified." Then Amara stood, just once. "Your Honor," she said, her voice even and low. "I did not come here to drag my former family through the mud. I came here because the people who invested in our shared ventures, small business owners, non-profits, pension funds, deserve transparency. This is not about a divorce. This is about theft." Her words did not rise in pitch. They did not need to. The judge tapped her pen against the table twice. It echoed like a gavel. "Assets are hereby frozen pending further review," she declared. "Motion for temporary restraining order is granted." The oxygen seemed to leave the room. The Vexley team froze. Harold Drexler blinked like someone had turned off his teleprompter. Soren opened his mouth to protest, but his attorney grabbed his arm, whispered something sharp, and sat him down. Outside the courthouse, a thunderstorm of reporters surged forward the moment the doors opened. Flashes popped like firecrackers. Microphones shot out from every direction. "Ms. Sinclair, is it true the funds were hidden offshore? Do you think this will bring down the Vexley Trust? Are you going to press criminal charges?" Leander tried to wave them off, but Amara stepped forward. She faced the cameras directly, shoulders square, eyes unwavering. "I did not file this motion for revenge," she said. "I filed it because silence protects the powerful, and silence is how corruption survives. One beat. Two. I am not here to tear down legacies. I am here to protect those who believed in them." The press caught it instantly. The soundbite. The frame. A black woman standing alone in front of one of the most powerful families in the region, calmly declaring moral war. The clip would be replayed that night on every major network. It would be quoted in op-eds, captioned on protest signs, echoed in comment sections by people who had never heard of Ironwood Hall until today. Inside her car, Amara leaned back, eyes closed. The firestorm had begun, and she had lit the match with nothing but facts, timing, and a voice that refused to shake. She knew the backlash would come, but so would the reckoning. And for the first time since walking away from Ironwood Hall, she felt the world begin to tilt, just slightly, in her direction. The courtroom was larger this time. Civil suits drew bigger crowds, bigger cameras. This one had overflow seating. Law students, retired judges, media outlets from 3 states, all packed into a chamber that now felt more like a theater. But there would be no encore. Not after today. The Vexleys arrived in full force. Isolde wore black pearls, the same pair she had worn at her wedding. Tamsin clutched a silk handkerchief, embroidered with the Ironwood crest. Soren, flanked by 2 new attorneys, refused eye contact with anyone but the cameras. To them, this was not just a legal matter, it was survival. Legacy was not a word, it was a monument. And Amara was seen as the earthquake. She did not flinch. She entered with Leander, once again in gray, her presence unnervingly calm. There was no fire in her eyes today, just steel, the kind that cut cleanly and without hesitation. Judge Newberry sat taller this time, fully aware the world was watching. She scanned the opening briefs in silence before looking up. Both parties will have 40 minutes for arguments, she said. Use them wisely. The defense went first. Isolde stood against the advice of her attorneys. Her voice, though aged, still carried the clipped elegance of money. For nearly 160 years, the Vexley name has stood for stewardship, she said. We have given scholarships, rebuilt churches, funded literacy drives, quietly. We do not publicize our philanthropy. We do not parade our virtue. We live it. She turned toward Amara. What happened here is not embezzlement. It is misinterpretation. Outsiders do not understand how old money sustains old values. Gasps, whispers. Tamsin followed, her speech more impassioned. She spoke of roots, of family traditions, of preserving what made Ironwood different. Her voice cracked when she spoke of her great-grandfather planting the first oak tree on the estate. Then came the pivot. They framed Amara as disruptive, too modern, too aggressive. Ambitious beyond the family's pace, as one attorney said. Their argument, she was trying to rewrite legacy into litigation. When they sat down, their side looked relieved, confident. Legacy, after all, made a compelling story. But Leander only adjusted his cuff once before rising. Our response, he began, is not about feelings. It is not about whether the plaintiff was liked at garden parties or if she understood the rhythms of generational wealth. He tapped the screen behind him. A slide appeared, emails, signatures, contractual agreements. It is about this: fiduciary duty, misuse of investment funds, breach of contract. This is not a culture clash. This is accounting malpractice at Mao scale. The room stilled. Then Amara stood. She spoke without notes. I was brought into the Vexley Trust, not because of tradition, but because of performance. I took our tech division from a paper prototype to a $600 million valuation in under 5 years. The same portfolio that now underpins half your liquidity. She looked directly at Isolde. I honored my end of the partnership. You just never planned to honor yours. Judge Newberry scribbled something down. Leander brought up one final chart. It showed where the money went, not to family homes or maintenance funds, but to offshore shell firms, bundled through layered trusts. This isn't legacy, he said. This is laundering. The courtroom erupted. The gavel slammed. Twice. Judge Newberry rose. I have heard enough, she said. Everyone leaned forward. Even the air seemed to listen. Based on the evidence provided, I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. She turned to the defense. The Vexley Trust is hereby ordered to dissolve the partnership. Full damages are to be paid to Ms. Sinclair, amounting to $42.7 million plus legal fees. Misappropriated assets are to be seized and frozen under federal oversight. Any appeals must be filed through appropriate channels. The words hit like thunder. Isolde's lips parted, but no sound came out. Soren slumped forward, as if the ruling had struck him physically. Tamsin's hands trembled. Amara remained still. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply nodded, once, and began packing her bag. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. Empire cracked in court, legacy on trial, and the outsider won. Sinclair victory sends shockwaves through old money circles. The press swarmed her as she exited, but Amara said nothing. She walked through the flashes, through the noise, through the rising fog of a collapsing dynasty, like someone who had already moved on from the victory, because, for her, this was not about revenge. It was about restoration. Justice was never loud. It did not always come with applause. Sometimes it just walked quietly out of court, head high, hands clean, and truth in its pocket. The gates of Ironwood Hall creaked open for the last time under the Vexley name. Auction day drew an unusual crowd, wealth managers, collectors, and curiosity chasers hoping to walk through a legend before it disappeared. Even the press stood silent as bidders filed in, their shoes echoing off marble floors that had once hosted senators, foreign dignitaries, and whispered betrayals. The vineyards were the first to go. then the lakefront parcels, the sculpture garden, the library's first edition wing. Bit by bit, Ironwood was peeled down to property value and tax liens. The family name did not carry premium anymore. It carried questions. The final item on the auction list was a portrait, Isolde's great-grandmother, painted in oils and pride. No one bid. It was quietly taken down, covered, and stored. Amara watched from her car. She had no need to go inside. Not anymore. She had already taken what she needed, the truth, and she was building something new with it. Helio Nexus launched 6 weeks after the ruling. It was not just a rebrand. It was a renaissance. Under Amara's leadership, the company doubled. Its transparency index, implemented blind review hiring, and partnered with STEM schools in underserved districts across 4 states. The first press release read, "Innovation without exclusion." She did not seek vengeance, she built vision. When the first public shareholders meeting came around, journalists expected fireworks. They brought loaded questions. Amara brought clarity. "We did not just survive legacy," she said on stage. "We outgrew it." The room fell quiet. Her voice held no bitterness, no barbs, just truth delivered clean, like morning light through unshuttered windows. She spoke of systemic rot, of the myths that guarded dynasties, and of how silence had protected power for too long. "We are not here to burn down history," she said. "We are here to build the future history we'll remember." Applause followed, long and rising. Even Leander, seated a few rows back, stood before the crowd did. They spoke less frequently now, not because of distance, but clarity. Some victories rewrote more than contracts. They redrew boundaries. And some alliances did not require constant contact to remain unshaken. There were rumors, of course. Late dinners, shared strategy decks. A glance too long at a gala, but when asked, Amara would only say, "He helped me find the floor when the world was trying to pull it out from under me." No more. No less. Ironwood Hall, stripped and silent, was finally purchased by a historical trust. They planned to convert it into a public leadership academy for underrepresented youth. Amara made no public comment. But the quiet donation she sent, enough to restore the East Wing, was signed anonymously. Her name did not need to be etched in stone. It was already etched into change. One evening, months after the verdict, Amara stood on a rooftop overlooking the Helio Nexus headquarters. The city pulsed beneath her, alive, indifferent, and infinite. In her hand was the same leather tote bag. No briefcase this time, no papers. Just a single folded photo of her younger self, standing outside a rented office, eyes full of ambition, unsure of her place. She no longer needed anyone's permission, not to enter a room, not to take up space, not to lead. She had redefined the frame, then built the painting herself. The wind moved through her curls. There was no music, no cheering, no slow-motion applause, just the truth and the weight she had carried, now finally laid down, not because it had broken her, but because she no longer needed to prove she could hold it. The auditorium lights dimmed. Spotlights framed the stage in quiet anticipation. Rows upon rows of seats were filled. Tech founders, policymakers, scholars, students, dreamers. Some wore suits, others wore sneakers. All watched the stage where history was about to speak. Amara stepped up to the podium without notes. She wore no badge of victory, no gold pins, no silk scarf with her initials. Just a midnight black suit and the calm of someone who had walked through fire and come out knowing exactly who she was. The room stilled. "There is a myth," she began, "that power is taken with force." Her voice carried low and steady. "That legacies are built on bloodlines, that buildings make empires, and that gatekeeping keeps things safe." A pause. "But what if I told you power crumbles not from war, but from truth?" Eyes leaned forward, Pens froze mid-air. Truth, she said, is the quiet undoing of every lie designed to keep you small. It is the ledger that cannot be rewritten. It is the mirror that never lies back to privilege. She scanned the audience, front row. Young women, some in hijabs, some with braids, some scribbling fiercely, some just watching her like they were memorizing the way she stood. Amara smiled, but not politely. Warmly, boldly, like someone who remembered what it was like to have no room and now owned the whole floor. I was never meant to belong, she said softly, so I stopped asking. Silence. Then, I built something no one could take from me. A beat, then thunder. The applause did not just come from hands, it came from hearts, from lived experience, from stories that had never been allowed to stand behind podiums until now. In the back of the room, someone wept quietly. Outside, the city carried on. But inside that hall, a new blueprint was laid down. No gate, no seal. Just an open door, and the echo of a woman who rewrote the rules not by fighting the empire, but by telling the truth until it fell. She was never meant to belong. So she built something no one could take from her.